Okay, so morning to the second class of this IR this week, and this week we have tweaked the way we used to deal with it based on the suggestions that I got on Telegram as well as on the comments. The first one is the language would be English, because there were a few students who said that since there are many from South India who would also be watching the video, so it's always better to keep the video completely in English. So in case at any points any student feels like that he or she is slightly less comfortable with English, you can tell me about that specific topic and that I would discuss in Hindi for a brief period. Otherwise, generally the discussion would be in English. And next is with respect to discussion of topics. Is my video audible? I mean, am I audible to all of you? Please tell me on the live chat. So that slight tweaking is, apart from discussing the major topics, and most of the topics that I shall be discussing today are what you have suggested me on the Telegram group, and our Telegram group is @IR this week, all small, no space in between. So initially we will be discussing the answer to the previous week questions, and then very briefly we will be looking at important news this week and in what type of questions those information can be useful. And after that we will be going to discuss those specific 3 or 4 topics in detail. However, the issue related to Israel and Palestine, because in recent week we saw that there was yet again some sort of flagrations and some sort of attacks and counter attacks between Hamas and Israel. So as a result, I have added this topic, and if we are unable to take up that topic in today's 2 hours, we will be discussing that topic in the coming week. Okay, and this was specifically because there was suggestion that I got on the Telegram group. So first let us look at the questions. So you see, previous week question, I hope that you people must have tried it. Let us look at it. The question says, discuss various geopolitical hotspots in East Asia with respect to India's stakes in the region. Suggest a hedging strategy for India to protect and further its interests in the region. So you see, the keywords: geopolitical hotspots in East Asia. No need to explain about geopolitics, okay, or what is geopolitics, etc., etc. Keyword is not geopolitics, but the keyword is geopolitical hotspots in East Asia with respect to India's stakes in the region. So segmenting the question, and this is not the sequence, okay, segmenting the question. In first part there are 2 subsections. One is geopolitical hotspots in East Asia, and second is India's stakes in the region. And the next part of the question, suggest a hedging strategy. I hope you are all aware about what is the meaning of a hedging strategy. Hedging strategy means whatever the risk that can be there, how we can reduce or minimize that risk. That is called as hedging strategy. So third part of the question is suggesting a hedging strategy. Okay, so these are three parts of the question. Okay, and while going for, we will be discussing all the three parts after specific subheadings. Okay, and those subheadings need not be bigger, just keep it brief to 2 or 3, at the max 4 words. Okay, do not go for a subheading like, okay, so a hedging strategy for India can be, and then 1 2 3 4 5. No, just 2 words or 4 words, hedging strategy for India, underline it, 1 2 3 4 5. Your subheadings must be very brief and should be clearly visible. Underline it or put it in a box so that the examiner can see it very clearly. Okay. So in my suggestion, flip these two, because what we would be doing, that first we will discuss that, okay, these are India's stakes in the region, but those stakes are under threat because of there are multiple geopolitical hotspots. And then the third part we will be discussing is hedging strategy for India. Okay, I hope this is clear to you. So as usual, introduction would be with East Asia. That East Asia is very significant for India's geopolitical and geo-economic interests because of various factors, and those factors would be 1 2 3 4 5, and those factors only would be India's stakes in the region. What are India's stakes in the region? And while going for subheading, do not write India's stakes in the region. You will have to tell them that you understand that the question is with respect to East Asia. So your subheading would be India's stakes in East Asia. Naturally, the first would be geopolitical. What would be that geopolitical? Ensuring peace in the region and peaceful rise of China. We do not write, and we will not be writing something like containing China. We do not believe in containment strategy. So the word with respect to China is peaceful rise of China. Okay, that would be the first one, geopolitical. Second one is economic. Why economic? Because nations like South Korea, Japan, they are key markets for India. Second would be with respect to investment. Yet again, Japan, South Korea, Taiwan, etc., they are very significant for investment purposes. Third would be technologically, be it for our own economic development or with respect to infrastructure development. For all those purposes, all these nations are needed. So economic would be under economy only. You can give a subhead investment purpose. Third would be security. And fourth one is, you can always go for either China plus one strategy या फिर diversification of supply chains. For reducing our dependence on China and for diversification of supply chains, all those nations, they are needed. Okay, this was the first part of the answer. Now the second one is geopolitical hotspots in East Asia. Now here you have to be very, very careful, and that is why you need to be aware of geopolitics, because the geopolitical hotspots in East Asia is not just Taiwan Strait. Okay, the first China-Taiwan dispute across Taiwan Strait. Then second would be China-Japan over Senkaku Islands. Then third, North Korea, South Korea across 30th parallel. Then yet again there is Japan, South Korea over Comfort Women. And for either you can make it fifth one or in fact your first one. What would be that China USA geopolitical ambitions in the region. Okay, so these would be geopolitical hotspots. Do not limit your discussion just to Taiwan, because in East Asia there are multiple hotspots, and the questions when they are asked, they want to know if you have complete knowledge of the issue rather than just about current affairs. Current affairs, that is why on the Telegram group I wrote it, that suppose Chinese ship docking at Sri Lanka, that can be just one point. We will be looking at it, but this is how you should be aware of the whole gamut of relationship. Okay, now the third part was a hedging strategy. What now, why do we need a hedging strategy? The first is ensuring peace in the region, geopolitics. So what would be? Deepening partnership with like-minded nations, and its example would be Quad. Second would be diversifying supply chains. You must be aware about SCRI, Supply Chain Resilience Initiative. This would go as example for that. Then the third would be diversifying economic engagements. And how we will do that? by by getting more involved or more economically engaged with other untapped regions like Africa and Latin America. You see, this is how you have to be creative, because you see, suppose there is some tension in the region and we have got our stakes deeply involved, it's but natural that our trade will get impacted. So rather than focusing on one specific region, it is always better to diversify ourselves, just as we have done in case of our energy dependence. We are no more completely dependent on Persian Gulf. Even if suppose there are some tensions in Persian Gulf, it's but natural that oil prices will spike. But now more than 15% of our energy comes from Africa. Then we saw we have increased our energy trade with Russia, with Latin America, even from USA we are getting our energy sources. Then there is Australia, Indonesia for coal. So that is how we have to think about it. Many a times you might not have read those specific points in your notes. So it's suggested that be creative, think out of the box, and the best way is to continue practicing this. Okay, so these are some of the suggestions. Now let us look at the question number 2. Time kitna hua? Yeah, I think it is taking too much time. Significance of Iran in India's geopolitical calculus. How does the Iran nuclear deal impact India? This we will be discussing because there is one news related to Iran's nuclear deal that is almost about to be completed. So we will discuss this question as part of that topic. And just let me suggest you the structure. One part would be significance of Iran. While discussing the answer to this particular question, you do not start introducing by giving detail about West Asia. Just limit yourself to Iran, that Iran is significant for India's geopolitical and geo-economic ambitions because of its location. You can see that Iran is a bridge between Central Asia, Eastern Europe, then West Asia. So that is why Iran becomes very much important. So significance of Iran. 1, geopolitical, because it is key power in West Asia, and West Asia is India's extended neighborhood. ठीक है? Second would be economic. Why economic? 2 things. First is energy security, and second is investment. Third would be connectivity, reaching up to Afghanistan and Central Asia. Fourth would be security purpose. What would be that security purpose? Stabilizing Afghanistan. ठीक है? So this is how you have to break your points. Geopolitical, economic, connectivity, security, or you can bring in security as point number 3, connectivity as point number 4. ठीक है? अगला, what is the next part? How does it impact? How does the nuclear deal impact? Nuclear deal it was, right? Nuclear deal impact. So nuclear deal is a positive for us. Impact of nuclear deal. What would be geopolitical? Yet again, the purpose would be help in stabilizing West Asia, because the purpose is that if Iran also becomes a normal nation, normal country, naturally the tensions between Israel and Iran, though it would be, however, that tension of Iran acquiring nuclear weapons, that tension would naturally subside. Similarly, Iran and Saudi Arabia, and if tension between these three poles they get reduced, it's but natural that this nation there will be peace in West Asia. Second would be, yet again, for India's energy security, or we know that presently the oil prices are very high, so deal would bring Iranian oil to market and cool down energy prices. Third would be with respect to investment, here Chabahar and INSTC. And yes, with respect to geopolitical, one more point. This would, I think this can be rubbed off. So second would be, the deal would reduce Iran's dependence on China. Because after signing of JCPOA as well, it was not that Iran went to China or other nations. Iran went to Europe. So this is a common understanding that if deal gets signed, naturally Iran would be somewhat away from the Chinese clout. Presently we have seen that a 25-year 400 billion deal was signed between Iran and China. However, Iran is skeptical and Iran does not want to increase its dependence on China. So the moment deal gets signed, it's but natural that Iran would look at European nations as its natural trade partners, because they are developed economies. Technological exchanges with them, that would be more beneficial for Iran. Moreover, a sanctions battered Iranian economy, it does need Western support. It will be needing Western support. Naturally, China's potential in itself is limited. Moreover, we are seeing that China is facing economic crisis. So due to all these factors, it would be beneficial for India. Now let us go back to important events this week. This discussion would be very brief. I would just be suggesting that where all these points can be mentioned. Yeah, Pulakeshwar, good morning. And I have added this specific segment because many a times what would happen is that suppose that because I used to pick up only 3 to 4 topics, but there are many more happenings that do take place. And if I discuss about that happening for after 2 or 3 weeks, naturally you would start scratching your head कि सर ने ये कहाँ से बता दिया, ये कब हुआ था, कैसे हुआ था. So uska solution, I have found a very simple solution, that very briefly what are the key events of this week, and later on I would go on to discuss some very specific news events from men's perspective. Okay. So the Yuang Wong Chinese survey ship, it has docked at Sri Lankan port of Hambantota. So this news can be significant if the question is related to Chinese engagements in South Asia, or Chinese engagements in Indian Ocean region, or India's challenge in the Indian Ocean region. What are the threats or geopolitical contestations that are happening in the Indian Ocean region? There you can bring in this news, this piece of information as an example. Because Chinese docking of ships that can be used for surveillance, because this is a satellite tracking ship with very strong radars. So naturally Indian ports like Kochi is there, then in Karnataka Karavar is there. They all would be within the range of this ship. And moreover, you can think about this, कि we gave a support of almost $4 billion to Sri Lanka, and Sri Lanka is permitting Chinese ship to dock which can do surveillance over India. So what is the purpose of India's investment in Sri Lanka? That was a complete waste. It is not so. Because again we will have to see that geopolitics, this plays in a specific framework. The very first thing is that initially the permission had been given by Gotabaya Rajapaksa regime, and perhaps at that time Gotabaya's aim was, if I give permission for China to dock, perhaps China would provide me with aid. That did not happen, and moreover 10% of all Sri Lankan debt are owed to China. So if suppose China had denied this, Sri Lanka had denied this docking, naturally there could have been economic retaliation, and perhaps the attempt for China was to test the waters, put Sri Lanka under pressure, that presently you are weakened and you have to do as per our whims. And this was also poking a finger in India's eyes, that even if you are helping out Sri Lanka, you see Sri Lanka is still on our side. This is an attempt by Sri Lanka to balance the relationship, because they have said that while while Chinese ship will remain docked at Hambantota, there won't be any research activities that will be done. Yet again you can say that Chinese cannot be trusted, but here naturally Sri Lanka's options are also very much limited. When you read at the statements of Chinese ministers or Chinese Sri Lankan ministers and Sri Lankan diplomats, they are as if they are, it is as if they are pleading. They are saying that we hope that India will understand our position, and we are trying to maintain a balance between relationship. And you see, in geopolitics, relations cannot take a complete 180-degree flip over 1 or 2 days or 1 or 2 weeks. Even within Sri Lanka, there is still a segment of population that is very much anti-India, and presently the government in Sri Lanka is also very much fragile. So suppose a new protest starts that the present regime is a puppet of India, so yet again that would be even more challenging for Ranil Wickremesinghe regime. Yes, docking of that ship, that is not at all in our interest. We would have never wanted that. But yet again, we can advise, we can guide, and we can create conditions where Sri Lanka can feel the heat. so that in future it does not resort to such activities. It can also be an attempt for blackmail on the part of Sri Lanka to extract more aid from India. So there can be multiple reasons, but that reason is just for you to understand. But this point can be used if the question is related to China in Indian Ocean region, China in South Asia, or India's engagements or India's challenge or in its own maritime region. Okay, you can give that Chinese increasing forays in the Indian Ocean region. For example, the docking of Chinese spy ship Yuan Wang at Hambantota. Okay, that's all. The purpose is just that one specific point, that two examples, nothing more. So you do not need to get into detail. You won't be asked to write a research paper over this issue, that what was the length of the satellite, how, for what distance it can spy upon, it can go for eavesdropping, not needed. Okay, that was the first news. The second one, this is the continuation of the topic that we discussed last week about Nancy Pelosi's visit to Taiwan. I had said you that in November there are elections in USA. So now if Nancy Pelosi, a Democrat, has come to Taiwan, how Republicans can stay behind? So this bipartisan delegation, one thing was to reassure Taiwan that we are with you, and to show to China that you cannot dictate terms to us. These are two parts, these are two geopolitical aspects. But most important aspect is USA internal politics, that if Nancy Pelosi can ask votes on the basis of its visit to Taiwan and its support for Taiwan and democracy, Republicans can also do the same. They can also demand votes on the same ground. And second is, when it is a bipartisan US delegation, it means both parties, be it Republican or Democrat, they continue to support Taiwan. So if there is a question with respect to China-Taiwan dispute and US stance, you can mention that there is a bipartisan support for Taiwan cause within USA. So any change in administration, in case of any change in administration, there is limited scope for change in USA stance. बाकी सारी चीजें, the rest of everything like no treaty signature, and USA continue to it has said that they have taken note of one China policy. So all those we have discussed in the last class. You can visit the last class video to get a detail about this news. But this was specifically political, and this was expected, because if Democrats have visited, हमारे यहाँ also you see कि suppose there is something, a mishappening has taken place, one political party will go, then another political party will go, then another political party will go. This is a similar scenario. This is pure US internal politics. This is something important, and this is something interesting. Pakistan to scrap CPC authority. Not too much news is over this, but yes, China has given its go ahead that okay, you can scrap it. The point is that presently CPEC, the projects were not going on, it has been struck for last 4 years. Moreover, there were cases of corruption even on the military officer who was heading CPEC authority, on whom also the charges of corruption were there. On the side of China, China saw that since the work is not going on and there is a threat to Chinese main and Chinese material in the region, the investment from China was also slowly drying up, and that was a pressure tactic from China, so that it was asking Pakistan to ensure security to its men, its material, and increase the pace of work on the CPEC projects, and moreover we also saw that in case of Chinese debt, particularly with respect to some of the energy projects that China had built up, some of the power plants, since the cost of electricity from those plants are very high and the government was unable to pay, China cut off the electricity. So these are some of the areas of tension, and moreover we will be discussing in detail in the coming moments. Okay. Next one is Iran nuclear deal close to be finalized. There are expectations because the USA and the Europeans, they have given their final proposal and it is being said that it is almost about to be completed. However, there is a problem with respect to that deal. In recent time we saw there was attack on Salman Rushdie, and one of the members of Iranian Revolution IRGC, Iranian Revolution Guard Corps, the most important, most elite army unit within Iran, one of its members, and it has been proscribed by the USA as a terror organization, sponsor of terror, and many of the companies and individuals related to IRGC, they have also been sanctioned. One of the key demands of Iran was initially was that IRGC should be taken out of sanctioned list. However, now Iran has left out that condition. Iran said that we are willing to go back to JCPOA. But one of the members, he was involved in an assassination attempt on John Bolton, USA National Security Advisor during Trump regime. So because of these two events, that is Salman Rushdie, attack on Salman Rushdie, because somewhere that Lebanese person was also influenced by IRGC, and then this attack on this assassination attempt on John Bolton. This has riled up the Republicans and they are not in favor of this deal, because their simple argument is through this deal all we are doing is to delay nuclear program of Iran. We are not ending that nuclear ambition of Iran. And there is a specific law in USA that if with respect to Iran nuclear deal, if the president or if the administration signs any agreement, within 5 days it has to be sent to the Congress, and US Congress can deliberate upon it for 1 month. And suppose the agreement is signed in next few days, then naturally by September or by October the deal will be sent to the Congress, and presently Democrats enjoy very thin majority in US Congress, and we already know that in November elections are due. So if Republicans get back the control of Congress, it's but natural that this whole deal they can rescind. So that is the bigger threat to this Iran nuclear deal. It may be seeming that it has been finalized, but because of that specific law, that whatever deal the administration has made with Iran, it has to be ratified or it has to be passed by the Congress. Congress can review it. So if Congress goes for a review, and there by the time, because in November the elections are due, so if after elections Republicans are back in power, they get back control of the House, and moreover we had seen in previous lecture that this has been a trend that the incumbent president's party generally suffers in the midterm elections. So that becomes a very significant threat, okay, to this Iran nuclear deal. And its benefit, how it can be beneficial for us? We have already discussed it. We want the deal to be signed so that Iranian oil will come to the market. Naturally, prices will cool down. We will go for investment in Chabahar and Chabahar region. Our connectivity to Afghanistan, Central Asia, and through INSTC up to Europe. So that is our interest, and apart from that, the tensions naturally that would subside. Next is India and China to participate in Vostok exercise in Russia. So this is just exercise that is being hosted by Russia, and there are other nations like Armenia, Belarus and all. There is not too much to be read into this news, because that is part of India's own international commitments. We also saw that whenever Russia was hosting the talks, be it BRICS or SCO, India was continuously participating. So our participation does not mean normalization of relationship with China, but it is about our own international obligations and our relationship with Russia. So if a question comes about India-China relationship, you can give this as an example, that participation at various forums does give opportunity for engagement and addressing each other concerns, because we are engaging with China on BRICS, then SCO, East Asia Summit, G20, on all these platforms we are engaging with China. So just like in our participation in Vostok exercise, that will help, any engagement at any platform will help in addressing each other's concerns. So this can be one of the suggestions about lowering down of tensions between India and China. वो एक चीज हो गई. या फिर what are the positives between India China relationship, because we know that there are tensions at the border. The dialogue process that has almost collapsed, because the external affairs minister, he was on his visit to Bangkok in Thailand, and he did say that relations are going through very poor phase, and he did mention about Asian century. So wherever there is a question related to India and China, their cooperation, bring in the idea of Asian century, that for achieving the goal of Asian century, India and China need to cooperate. Similarly, in case of what are the positives, you can mention that despite tensions on the borders, India and China participated in Vostok exercise in Russia. So this is a positive, because we are still engaged, we are not completely disassociated with each other. Because in geopolitics, suppose you have stopped talking, naturally the tensions that will increase. And even at the height of Cold War, USSR and USA both were engaged. Thus, there is a need for nations to remain engaged, and this is a positive between India-China relationship. Then next piece of news, and this you would be reading in, I think, today's newspaper only. You will be reading this news, that there was a proposal in UNSC, because presently there are sanctions on 13 key members of Taliban. So as the dialogue process was going on, those sanctions related to their visit to international visits and all, those sanctions, they had been suspended for a specific period of time. So the proposal came back to UNSC yet again, and China and Russia, as expected, they said that they want that this suspension of sanctions must continue. But what Western nations they have said, they are in favor of imposing back the sanctions, and the purpose is to increase pressure on Taliban, because they have gone back on their concession with respect to women education, right of women, right of minorities, ensuring peace and stability within Afghanistan. They have gone back on those words. So Western goal is to increase pressure on Taliban so that they uphold their commitments. However, Russia and China, because Russia is looking at proximity with Taliban, the purpose is so that terror emanating from Afghanistan could be restricted, because the southern portion of Russia, the Chechen region and all, they have got a significant chunk of Muslim population, and apart from that, even in Central Asian nations there is a significant Muslim population, and any instability in Central Asia will have a spill over to Russia's own backyard, Russia's own territory. Moreover, presently Russia is engaged in Ukraine, so it would never want that a new front like tackling terrorism in its own southern region should emerge. So that is why, that is the goal of Russia. And with respect to China, it wants to have good relations with Taliban because of ETIM, East Turkestan Islamic Movement, a rebel group in Xinjiang region of Uyghurs. So China wants support of Taliban in tackling them so that Taliban does not provide sanctuary to them. We will be discussing that in the coming chapters, coming topics. And next is with respect to investment. China wants to expand CPEC up to Afghanistan. Moreover, Afghanistan's untapped resources, like it has got copper, then it is iron, there is Mes Ayang, and then Hajigak. All these are significant mineral reserves and China wants to tap them, and that is why China wants to get closer with Taliban. However, there is no agreement, and the West, they have given a proposal back to China and USA, and perhaps within 2 or 3 days there would be some sort of decision on this news. Taliban has welcomed India's embassy opening. This we will be discussing in detail while discussing Taliban and India, Taliban-India relations. And China wants a military presence in Pakistan and Afghanistan. This we will be discussing in the coming topic. Okay. So, any doubts to anyone? You can keep writing on the chat box in case there is some specific question that you want to ask or there is any topic. So, these are the topics: Afghanistan under Taliban dispensation, then Taliban India engagement, China's demand for military outpost, and Israel-Palestine dispute. I have doubts that I would be able to take up this topic, and that is why the probable questions or question for practice, they are not from this topic but mainly from these 3 topics. There are 2 questions, and the PDF has been shared on the Telegram group. Sorry, not PDF but the PPT has been shared on the Telegram group, and the Telegram group is @IRTHISWEEK. You can give all your suggestions or all your comments below the YouTube video. As I saw somewhere discussing, some were asking me to continue the lecture in English only. So I am continuing that in lecture in English. So let us look at the first topic. Afghanistan under Taliban dispensation. You see, for this we need to go back to how Taliban regime emerged. Initially there was monarchy in Afghanistan. Okay. Then what happened around 1976? a communist, there was coup, and after that communist regime came. And mind you, this was the time of Cold War, and we have got Pakistan, which was part of Tito and Cento, part of USA bloc. And everyone knows how significant is Afghanistan's geopolitical position. So naturally, there was retaliation against communist regime because of two factors. One was the socio-religious factor, another was geopolitical factor. Communists, they do not believe in God, but Afghanistan, that was a traditional Muslim nation, a Pashtun region. So naturally, there was retaliation from Mujahideens. Okay, so there was retaliation against communist regime. So what happens in 1979? USSR came. Initially, USSR had sent some advisors. Initially, they had sent some advisors, but by December of 1979, USSR came. And if USSR has come, naturally, USA would also get involved. So CIA partnered with Pakistan and they started training the Mujahideens. And with help of Stinger missiles and all, they started targeting the USSR forces and the administration. Okay? So this became a proxy battleground of the Cold War between USA and USSR. As a result, by 1989, USSR left, and you must be remembering this was the time of collapse of USSR. And after this, by 1992-93, Najibullah regime, the communist regime in Afghanistan, that also collapsed because support of USSR had gone, and USSR itself was not in a position to take care of itself, because at that time various regions of USSR, they were getting disintegrated. So Russian economy was in a very poor situation. So naturally, they won't be able to sustain Afghanistan. So after collapse of communist regime, who came? Mujahideens came to power. But the problem with them was that there were multiple factions, there was too much violence, and they could not keep it up. And by 1995-96, Taliban, supported by ISI and Pak army, they came to power. They got control of initially Kandahar and then Kabul. However, they did not have control over whole of Afghanistan. the northern areas, they were with the rebel groups, and that alliance was called as Northern Alliance. Now let us just look at the map. Yes. So you see, this is Afghanistan, okay, and these are so these are the Northern Alliance areas. And this Northern Alliance area, because you must have heard about Panjshir Valley and Ahmad Shah Massoud. Ahmad Shah Massoud, a friend of India. Okay. So this Panjshir Valley and all these regions, they were not in control of Afghan administration even during the USSR days. Even USSR had tried to take control of Panjshir Valley, but it is geopolitically, it is geographically located in such a way, there is only one path of entry and exit, and from all other sides it is a hilly region. So if all these mujahidins, if they take control of the higher reaches of the mountains, naturally it becomes very easy for them to target the USSR forces. But what changes? Okay, so this was the case of Northern Alliance, and when this is Tajikistan, we have got a air base here for Khor. We were with Northern Alliance because we had not recognized Taliban, and we were also maintaining a military hospital over here. Why we were maintaining? Naturally, Taliban was a bigger threat to us, and you must be remembering hijack of IC-814, and it was taken to Kandahar. Moreover, this was the time when USA, Russia and Central Asian nations, they were all collaborating against Taliban. And this Northern Alliance, it could sustain because it was getting support through all these nations. There is Uzbekistan, then there is Tajikistan, then there is Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan. Because अभी क्या दिक्कत हुई पंजशीर के केस में? वाई पंजशीर कुड नॉट होल्ड ऑन टू इट? बिकॉज ये जो आसपास के एरियाज थे, ऑल द बॉर्डर रीजन्स ऑफ, because Panjshir is somewhere around here in the middle, it does not share border with any other nation. So previously the situation was that even if this area was blocked, or not this like this but like this, suppose this area was blocked, the supply of arms, ammunitions and food that was reaching through all these neighboring nations. But what happened this time was that Taliban, they started capturing from border regions. So if you are cut off from outside world, naturally you cannot sustain on your own for a longer period. So as a result, ultimately Taliban could get a control of Panjshir this time. So at that time, only 3 nations between 1995, so this was the geographical position. So at that time, between 1995 to 2001, there were only 3 nations who had recognized Taliban. They were as usual Pakistan, then it was UAE and Saudi. This time none of these nations, even Pakistan, has not recognized Taliban. Then what happened in 2001? We saw 9/11 attacks by Lashkar-e-Taiba, and USA demanded Taliban that you surrender Osama bin Laden to us. Taliban said that we are not going to surrender, and USA invaded Taliban, and this was termed as war on terror. With USA invasion, it's but natural that Taliban could not hold its ground and they retreated. And then their base was shifted to Quetta in Pakistan. So just look at the situation of Pakistan. Pakistan was also providing supply route to USA up to Afghanistan, and it was also harboring the Taliban. That is the type of game that Pakistan plays. Okay, so this was the situation. Then what happened after 2001? US supported regime came. Initially it was Hamid Karzai. Since 2014 it was Ashraf Ghani. And then 15th August 2020-21, Taliban ran over whole of Afghanistan and regained back the control of Afghanistan. That is the brief history. Okay. So Taliban back in power, then it was driven out, then back in power on 15th August 2021. Now the question comes, despite USA support for 20 years, why Afghanistan could not hold on to itself? Because if we look in the past, during 1990s, against Taliban there was Northern Alliance, and which was very strong. But this time Taliban didn't face any such resistance, and had there been such resistance, had there been scope for such resistance, perhaps India would have gone for supporting that resistance, USA would have come for supporting that resistance. But if resistance is not there, it's but natural that nations, they always hedge their options, that suppose if not against Taliban, then against some other group, otherwise some other group. This time there was no such group. But before getting into that, we will have to understand the geopolitics or the societal structure of Afghanistan. And once you understand the societal structure of Afghanistan, you will simply understand why Ashraf Ghani regime, even after being supported by the USA, failed and failed so miserably. So you see, in Afghanistan, it is not a plain area, it is mainly a hilly area, and here there are tribal loyalties, and the population is also fragmented in a similar manner. Roughly 46% are Pashtuns. Then it is Tajiks around, I think 16 to 17%. Then there are Hazaraj. Then there are Uzbeks. Both of them are roughly around 10% or so. So this is the breakup of Afghanistan. And all these tribal identities, they are very strong. These are very, very strong. And moreover, in Afghanistan, cities are there in such a manner, they are like camp towns. Between one city to another, there is a huge difference, and in between there are just mountainous regions, mountain passes or barren lands. So, any central authority in Afghanistan, for any central authority to continue to operate beyond Kabul, there need to be a better and continuous communication network through roads, through railways, through airways, through telecommunication. But unfortunately, Afghanistan itself is very poor. We did construct a highway, that was Garland Highway or Jaranj Delaram Highway. And this highway was something like this. The purpose was to address that connectivity gap within Afghanistan, so that its main areas like there is Kandahar, then there is Kabul, then there is Mazar-e-Sharif, all these key towns, they could be linked with each other. Once the town areas get linked, naturally there will be economic activities, people will start resettling from one area to other, ethnic loyalties will weaken, and slowly nationalism, a pan-Afghan nationalism would develop. That was the purpose. Then what happened with respect to Ashraf Ghani regime? The problem was that there was crisis of legitimacy, and this crisis was twofold. Crisis of legitimacy, one was political or constitutional. Ashraf Ghani, he fought 2 elections, and the result of both elections were disputed. His adversary was Abdullah, and both these times he challenged election of Ashraf Ghani. He said that he has not won, I have won. So unless there is a clear-cut undisputed leader within Afghanistan, you cannot expect the whole nation to rally behind that particular leader. So Hamid Karzai's leadership, the legitimacy of his rule, that was questioned. That was the way he was elected, the way he came to power, that was questioned. And the second one was on the basis of, what should I say, ideological, and this challenge was put by Taliban, and Taliban said that this regime is Western supported, this is a puppet regime, and in such tribal societies, in societies like Afghanistan, it is that ethnic pride that is very much dominant. So though Ashraf Ghani also, he is also a Pashtun, but Taliban, he questioned his legitimacy because he was supported by a Western government and there were US and NATO forces on the ground in Afghanistan. So his legitimacy was questioned. The second one was high corruption. Corruption was very high. All the funds that were coming, they were not reaching to the people. So if people are not getting benefited from the central administration, and on the other hand, Taliban in the border areas of Afghanistan can provide some sort of administration, naturally common people, they will get more inclined towards Taliban. And moreover, Taliban got both. One was religious support, because Afghanistan is a traditional society. So naturally, all those religious dictums, the idea of implementing Sharia, that will be supported by the rural population. The opposition, that is mainly in the urban areas, and Afghanistan is not a urban society. And next was, the support was because of ethnicity. Afghans, Taliban were also Pashtuns, and around 46% of Afghan population, it is also Pashtun. So they got legitimacy, and the Ashraf Ghani regime, it got delegitimized. And when there is high corruption, this high corruption not only impacted the morale of bureaucracy and common people, but also the army. So if army is not being funded regularly, they are not being paid regularly, how can you think of them to fight against the Taliban? Third was, with respect to army, there was poor training and high attrition rate. You see, the Taliban, they were ideologically motivated, they were religiously motivated, but there was no such motivation with respect to Afghan army. Moreover, they were poorly trained, they were poorly equipped, and the death number was very high. There was lack of regular salary and all, and that is why when the Taliban onslaught came, they capitulated. Okay. And the next one, and this one is very important, among the most important point for you to understand why it happened, whatever happened in case of Afghanistan, because that was quite shocking for many. No, because Afghan army was not that weak, they had some very quality equipments, but they were lacking on training, they were lacking on morale, they were not being paid regularly, they were not being paid properly. So what they thought was, rather than fighting against them and getting ourselves killed, simply surrender to them. So they capitulated, and there is also an understanding, there is also an opinion that there was some sort of understanding. Okay. So now let us look at another aspect, and this is the most important aspect for understanding Afghan geopolitics. We know that in Afghanistan there are tribal loyalties, and those specific tribes, they have their own leaders, and they became warlords, that in their area the central government interference will be very limited, and they will be responsible for ensuring peace in their regime. Like someone like Dostum, he is also called as Marshal Dostum. He was head of Afghan army. Then Atanur, he was governor of a province. So all these warlords, they were perennially against Taliban, because they are, in general, they are ethnic, This Dostum, he is an ethnic Tajik. I think Atanur, he is also either he is a Tajik or he is a Kazakh. Tajikistan, Kazakhstan. So naturally they will get support from all these nations. Moreover, Taliban, they are Pashtun group. Okay. So because of these separate ethnicities, naturally there was tension, and all of them, be it Ahmad Shah Massoud, Marshal Dostum, Ata Noor, and all, you can search on internet, you will get to see all of them. And presently all of them are, they are not in Afghanistan, they are away. So they were with, at that time they were with Northern Alliance, and it is these people and their own private militia that had made Northern Alliance a force to reckon with, and it could hold on against Taliban. And even during Hamid Karzai regime, he did understand all of this. So these people, they were put in key power positions so that they can hold on to, they can continue to support the central administration. But what happened in recent times was that Ashraf Ghani, he is Western educated and he wants a Western type of administration in Afghanistan. So all these people, they were, all these warlords, they were asked to surrender their weapons. And after surrendering, it was said that you will be provided security by the Afghan administration. So once you surrender your weapons, then there are the charges of corruption that are lodged against you, you are being investigated. Naturally your affection towards the central administration, that will get weakened. And when that affection got weakened, naturally all and their arms that had also been surrendered to the central government. As a result, militarily all these people, they did not remain equally strong. So in August of 2021, when the attack of Taliban came, these people did not have their weapons with them, their people with them. So naturally they had to capitulate, and in order to save themselves, they crossed the border. And it is these people who had made the central administration strong. And when this support is gone, and you have got an Afghan army which is not well paid, well funded, well trained, and it also lacks on motivation. And on the other hand, Taliban, they are highly motivated, highly radicalized group. Something like that was bound to happen. So this is the case of why Northern Alliance could hold on to, but the present Afghan administration, because Ashraf Ghani, he could not understand the ground realities of Afghanistan, and he wanted to impose an administration something like USA. So that was that strategic blunder, because you always have to respect the seats of authority, because Afghanistan, it was just a budding democracy. It had not strengthened. Once democracy had got strengthened, it is the people themselves who would have demanded all these warlords to cede power. And perhaps in next 30 to 40 years, democracy would have sustained. Moreover, when USA said under Trump administration that we are going to evacuate Afghanistan, it was but natural that Taliban would get emboldened, and Afghan army, the psychological impact of USA not backing you, that psychological impact is huge. And because of that also, that was another reason why Afghan army could not sustain. Okay, so these were the key reasons why this happened in case of Afghanistan. Now let us look at, so we have discussed in detail. So has anyone got any doubts related to Afghanistan and Taliban? Because we have discussed up to this portion, why Taliban came back to power on 15th August 2021. But presently Taliban also it faces challenges because of internal factionalism. Because in Taliban presently the power is with Haqqanis, and these Haqqanis they are supported by the ISI. Okay, but then there is another faction that is led by Mullah Yaqub. Who is Mullah Yaqub? He is son of Mullah Omar. The founder of Taliban. So this within Taliban also there are factions, and apart from that there are some disgruntled groups, and there have been news in recent times that in the northern regions a prominent Shia commander of Taliban, he has rebelled against Taliban, and his ruse is that in Taliban it is not inclusive and it is not giving power and representation to various ethnic identities. And moreover, if he is a Shia commander, neighbor of Afghanistan, that is Iran, it is also a Shia nation. So that will increase tensions for Taliban, and that is what we have discussed here. Initially we saw Tajik under Ahmad Shah Massoud. They tried to hold on to Panjshir. Unfortunately they could not hold on, but there are frequent news of tensions around the region, and recently we also saw that within a mosque there was a blast and more than 20 people died. So even within Afghanistan, Taliban are not the only power, and that is a good news for us, because if Taliban becomes all in all, it gets emboldened and it can go for adventurism across the region, and that can be problematic for us, particularly in Jammu and Kashmir. But if the Taliban remains engaged within Afghanistan, naturally they won't be looking outwards. Okay, so this was one aspect of it. The another aspect is emergence of IS, that is Islamic State. Slowly Islamic State is also getting its foothold in Afghanistan, and that has become a significant threat for not only Afghanistan but also for Pakistan and China, because in this Islamic State even there are Baloch groups and Uyghur groups, and they also have a strong resentment against China because of treatment of Uyghurs in Xinjiang region. Because the way Taliban has taken stand in favor of China, that China is our gateway to the whole world, that is not being appreciated across Afghan society, mainly among these radical groups, because there are news about China erasing mosques and rebuilding toilets. Then it is trying to sinicize Islam within China. So as a result, there the influence of Islamic State is continuously increasing. And as the influence of Islamic State increases, the security challenge for us that will increase. Here the dimension is different, that if Afghanistan gets destabilized because of internal unrest between Taliban and Islamic State, naturally there will be a refugee crisis. There can be spillover of tension. So a limited tension within Afghanistan, that is favorable to us because it will keep Taliban engaged within Afghanistan, but a large scale tension that can spill over to the region. It can create tensions for the Central Asian nations, then it is Iran, then for us. This will lead to refugee crisis. There will be some ungoverned spaces that can lead to narcotics trade, because Afghanistan, it is part of Golden Crescent. So that is the tension for Taliban as well as even for us. So that is what is written over here. This IS is Islamic State. Challenges for India and other nations. This we will be discussing in greater detail, because this can be a part of your mains question. Okay. Challenges. In general, challenge for all the nations, the first one would be spill over of internal tensions and civil unrest within Afghanistan to neighboring nations, and they can be Central Asia, Iran, Pakistan, China and India. Second would be, this would lead to refugee crisis, right? Third would be, I think some of you, sir, please conduct the session in complete English so that, yaar Indupriya, today the session is in complete English. Hardly 1 or 2 words have been uttered by me in Hindi, and moreover they are almost not, they are of very little relevance. So just go through the video, it's in complete English. Okay, so this would lead to refugee crisis. Then spike in terror related incidents, and fourth would be narcotics trade. Okay, these are general challenges for all the nations. Now let us look at nation specific challenge. The first would be Iran. Iran is a Shia nation. and Taliban, even Taliban as well as IS both are Sunni factions. So naturally this will play into Shia Sunni divide for Iran. Iran being a nation, being a neighbor of Afghanistan, refugee crisis, then this will complicate the security situation for Iran because manning the borders will become more difficult. Okay, then Central Asia. You see, in case of Central Asia, though they are by religion, they are mainly Islamic nations, but these are multicultural societies. So for Central Asian nations, Taliban or any tension within Afghanistan is a huge problem for them, because suppose that radicalization spill over to Central Asian nations, all these nations that are multicultural but economically they are poor. So this will complicate their own security situation. Okay, then this will again complicate the security scenario for Russia that we have already discussed in the very beginning. Okay, then let us come to Pakistan. Coming of Taliban, this has emboldened Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan TTP. And another problem for Pakistan is that in its NWFP, because NWFP is also a Pashtun dominated region, and NWFP and Afghanistan, they are divided by Durand line, and Taliban doesn't recognize Durand line. Okay, so when Pakistan, they started fencing the region so that the TTP does not get benefit, because what TTP does, it will get into Pakistan, it will create unrest, it will plan attacks against security forces of Pakistan, and when action starts against them, they would simply cross the border into Afghanistan. And it's but natural that Pakistan would not dare to violate the boundaries of Afghanistan under Taliban. So Pakistan started fencing so that TTP does not run away. But what has happened is, Pakistan was putting up the fencing, and from the behind, Taliban was uprooting the fencing. Taliban said that no, such fencing, they divide the families, they divide communities, and since both are common communities, both are same ethnic Pashtuns, there is no need for boundary. And Pakistan, it was hoping that if they support Taliban, they would recognize Durand line. But Taliban, they have plainly refused to recognize the Durand line, and they have not clearly committed to bring back TTP to the negotiation table or control the TTP. So as a result, the Pakistan government has been forced to negotiate with TTP, and TTP has a very simple argument. It says that if Sharia is good for Afghanistan, why Sharia is not good for Pakistan? So that is the point of TTP, and such points, they do get resonance within Pakistan society. When we look at groups like Tehreek-e-Labbaik, TLP, they are also same puritanical extremist groups. So this has created not just a governance but also security challenge for Pakistan. Okay, So for Pakistan, Durand line, then it is TTP, then yet again for Pakistan there would be refugee crisis, and then since in IS Baloch groups have also got associated threat to Pakistani assets and Chinese assets within Balochistan. Okay, so these are challenges for Pakistan. Now let us look at China. I think I have got a map. Yes. So you see, I think language is somewhat different. Please excuse me for the language. I think it is in some other language, but I think we can understand this. You see, this is Afghanistan, and this region that you see is Xinjiang. Look at the geographical proximity, and this small one is Wakhan corridor. Now this one is better. Okay. So this one is this region is Xinjiang, and this small strip of land, this is Wakhan corridor. Okay. So imagine a strong IS within Afghanistan where there are Uyghurs groups that are involved, and moreover here there is ETIM, East Turkestan Islamic Movement, and China has got an assurance from Taliban that they would not give refuge to Uyghur militants or Uyghur extremists or separatists in the region, but IS has made no such commitment. And when in IS there will be Baloch and Uyghurs, naturally this will complicate the security situation, not only in this region but also whatever projects that are coming over here. It is CPEC, China Pakistan Economic Corridor, because the Uyghurs, they have got problems with China because of their treatment in Xinjiang, and Baloch, they have got tension with China because of Chinese projects in Balochistan, and they are being deprived of their livelihood. In recent times, we have seen attacks on Chinese projects within Pakistan. To a great extent, in recent times, there has not been such bad news from Xinjiang. But if IS gets strengthened in Afghanistan, it's but natural that this region of China will also get restive. So, and again, even for USA, they can plot terror attacks on other lands since the area has become restive. Stability will be more difficult. So, there can be more terror related incidents in the region. Cases of narcotics trade, that will be a threat for Europe. Okay. So challenges for India and other nations, this we discussed, and opportunity for cooperation. Opportunity for cooperation. When you discuss opportunity for cooperation, bring in specific nations and specific organizations. In case of Central Asia and in case of Afghanistan, never forget SCO, Shanghai Cooperation Organization, because almost all of Afghan neighbors are there in SCO. So, tensions within Afghanistan, this create opportunity for India and China to cooperate. What for? For stabilizing Afghanistan. Then this can re-energize SARC. We know that presently SARC is in limbo. But if we re-energize SARC, India and Pakistan, they can come together, because it is a tension for Pakistan and it is a tension for India. You will naturally ask that how can we think of Pakistan cooperating with India on Afghanistan? Completely acceptable, valid argument. But then again you are being asked for suggestions, and in suggestions you can always be somewhat optimistic, somewhat idealistic, because had we not been optimistic with respect to China, with respect to Pakistan, we would not have gone for diplomatic engagements. So in suggestions you have to be certain optimistic to a certain level. Okay, then cooperation between India and Iran, India and Iran, Russia with respect to USA, because tension सबके लिए tension remains same for all these nations. And yes, mention about Delhi regional security dialogue. This was a meeting of the NSS and all the nations that are neighboring Afghanistan, Iran, Pakistan, China, Russia and Central Asian republics. NSA of all the nations, they were invited. But China did not come and Pakistan did not come. NSA of all these nations, they came, and Iran accepted, and Iran said that India has a stake in stability of Afghanistan. And after few days, China kept a meeting for the same purpose and it did not invite India. So with respect to Afghanistan, this shows a point of divergence between India and China, that China does not want India to increase its footprints in Afghanistan, because target for first China is to limit the geopolitical profile of India. But if India gets involved in Afghanistan, we have got $3 billion worth of investment in Afghanistan. We are the biggest regional donor or biggest regional aid provider to Afghanistan. So naturally this will underscore this will strengthen India's leadership in the region. But that is something China does not want. And next, with respect to Pakistan, Pakistan wants strategic depth within Afghanistan. And it wants to restrict India's profile, and that is why when we said that okay, we will not get involved militarily, we will remain involved economically, and this was suggested to us by USA. So Pakistan was suggesting USA and USA was suggesting us, and we said okay, we want to remain involved economically, no militarily. then what happened? Even our economic investments, they are at stake, they are under threat. So this provides opportunity for cooperation to institutional. One is SCO, another is Delhi Regional Security Dialogue, and third would be re-energizing SARC. And apart from that, between India and Iran, this provides opportunity for engagement. So in case of India-Iran relations, Afghanistan will be a point. Between India-China relations, cooperation on Afghanistan will be a point. With respect to India-Pakistan, cooperation on Afghanistan will be a point. If we talk about India and Russia, India and Europe, India and USA, for all these nations, cooperation on stabilizing Afghanistan will be a point, because Afghanistan is a threat for all these nations. Okay. So opportunities for cooperation, and I think it's already time. So rest of the topics, they will be discussed in the next class, and from next time onwards I would only suggest 2 topics, not more than that, because we are seeing that since we are going into greater detail, it is taking too much time. In the comments you can always suggest that should I compress this discussion, or this type of detailed discussion is good for you. You can suggest in the comments, you can suggest on the Telegram group, because this PPT that has been provided in the Telegram group, and that group is @IRTHISWEEK all small. Now let us just go for questions. Okay, these are 2 questions. Okay, it's only 10:52. But you see, let me just briefly give you an idea, and I want you people to write these questions. Please practice. Write it down and then leave it. The next week, in the beginning of the class, when I discuss it, you evaluate whether you have written down all those points or not. Okay, and after that evaluation, in case there are certain doubts, you can always post your comments either after the class in the comment section or presently in the chat box, because in chat box there aren't too many doubts, and I want you people to please ask your doubts. Otherwise I could have recorded this video at my own comfort, and this would have been uploaded on the account. But the purpose of live discussion is so that you people can ask doubts. Please do not remain a passive listener. Please ask questions, whatever doubts you have got. I am there to answer it. I am there to make you understand. Okay. So these are the questions. India's Afghanistan policy has seen a shift from idealism to pragmatism. Discuss. You see, unfortunately I could not discuss India Afghanistan. We will be discussing India Afghanistan in next class, and there you will be getting opportunity to answer this, and even the second one. Yaar, you see, unfortunately cheezein it could not happen today, so you won't be able to. So don't worry, in this video under the comments I will post 2 questions related to today's class. Whatever I have taught you today, there will be 2 questions posted. First here, and also I will be posting 2 questions on the Telegram group. You please write the answers of those, and in the next class I will not be discussing these questions but those 2 questions. By today evening, 2 questions that will be posted in the Telegram group and under the comment of this specific video. Okay. So that's all for today. Thank you very much, and please do give suggestions, and if you have got any doubts, please ask that in the comment section or on the Telegram group. Thank you. That's all for the class from today.